And Admiral, thank you for your service and, of course, what your men and women do. Let me talk about immigration a little bit and part of the work that you all do. Traditionally, Cubans who were coming into the U.S. would cross the water and then go through Florida most of the time. The last 2-3 years, they've been coming through my hometown of Laredo, which is a port, a land port. In fact, the last 2 years, out of the 67,000 Cubans that came in, 47,000 of them came through a port of Laredo, land port. And as you know, the wet foot dry policy, the 1966 Cuban Adjustment Act says basically if you touch the U.S., you get to stay. The wet foot policy came in, and basically, you know what that means. Now there's no more wet foot dry policy, at least for some of them, because they were coming in through Ecuador, Colombia, Panama, and then Costa Rica to Nicaragua said put a hold on them. And then they would come in through Laredo, not come through a river, not come in and see Border Patrol. They actually would see only CBP, which are the men and women that we have at the bridges. They just come through a bridge, show their passport, 45 minutes or so, they come through, and that's it. And then they're fast track. 1 year, they become legal residents, and then in 3 years, they become U.S. citizens. They can ask for immediate federal benefits on the moment they come in. So you can understand what's been happening at the border. If you can tell us, and I'm looking at some numbers as to what you all have, I think for FY 2015, Coast Guard made a total of 3,800 maritime migrant interdictions, which 2,900 of them were Cuban nationals. Do you have any thoughts whether the Joint Task Force East is taking to extend the zone of security that helps us address this issue? Because now somebody got real smart and said, forget about the water. Well, they're still doing that, but now they're coming in the thousands. And what they're doing is now they're flying directly from Costa Rica, Iberia, Costa Rica. They'll fly into Nuevo Laredo, which is a city right across Laredo, and they fly in. They take a bus, maybe not a Uber, but they'll take a bus or a taxi, and then they get to the bridge and they're in. Any thoughts on how we address this issue, besides changing the 1966 Cuban Adjustment Act, which I think is the magnet in this case?
Yes, Congressman. What happened in the last year and a half, there was a fourfold increase in remittances that could be sent back to Cuba. So those who were the benefactor of these remittances then had the wherewithal to get on an airplane, get to Central America, ultimately Mexico, cross our land port of entry in Laredo, and as soon as they cross that border, their feet dry. Not everyone is the recipient of these remittances. Just in the last quarter, our numbers in maritime flow is up about 45% from where it was a year ago. And what we're seeing are those that don't get these remittances. And in fact, one of our most recent interdictions, we asked, how many of you, is this the first time you've been stopped by the Coast Guard? Some, it was the fourth or fifth time. And says, well, what are you going to do when you go back? He says, well, we'll come back again. And they'll keep trying and trying until they ultimately go feet dry and are welcomed into the United States. So it's a policy, but it's also a policy that is folded in with, is Cuba a country that honors human rights? So if we're going to address this policy, I think in the same breath, we have to take stock of the government of Cuba, and is this a country that abides by human rights policies? In the interim, we need to protect our borders.
Yeah, and I understand that, and certainly I think maybe when President Obama goes down there, he can address some of those issues because, my good friend Mario Diaz-Balart and some of us, we've talked about that. But it's more political freedom. The Central Americans are escaping. They're escaping. It's a life and death situation for them because they're escaping drug cartels, trying to put them into prostitution, try to get them into join the gang. So it's a little different. But for those folks, we deport. So you can understand how the Central Americans and the Mexicans and even people on my side of the, on this side of the river feel. It's a little unfair. One is trying to escape political freedom, and here they're trying to escape death in many cases. So it's, I understand what you're saying. It's a politically correct answer, but understand that at least us on the ground on the southern border, we're facing two folks coming in trying to escape the death, and I think you know this. We've talked about this. People are trying to escape the drug cartels and the violence and some of the most violent places in the world in Central America, and we deport them after a while. But here they touch and they're in. So I do understand your answer, but my question is, any way we can at least put a speed bump for some of the folks coming in on the land area? And I know you're more water, but any thoughts on that question?
Again, through the Joint Task Force approach, looking at who are the enablers of moving these individuals. They generally don't move on their own, so there is a human trafficking, organized crime element to this as well. And I think that's really what we need to be focusing our attention to as well. Exploiting this this policy that we have in that regard. Our biggest challenge in the maritime domain, people taking such acts of desperation as to shoot themselves and not damage any vital organs, swallow bleach, use babies as fenders to keep our ships away from boarding them. But truly desperate measures to find a better life here in the United States, which is really no different than what we're seeing in Central America.
On the aids to navigation, I don't represent Corpus Christi, but it's part of Texas. That I'd like to ask you is your budget request, about $51.1 million for shore units and aids to navigation. Could you tell us real quickly what the process and the criteria for prioritizing aid to navigation projects, and more importantly, do you have the authority right now to do a reimbursement to non-federal entities that choose to advance the aid to navigation projects pursuant to your specifications? We're doing that because we did that for CBP. Myself and Chairman Carter, we added language to do reimbursement. Are you allowed to do that reimbursement? Or you're allowed to get money if let's say, the city of Corpus Christi decides to move forward and advance that funding?
Congressman, right now we do not have a reimbursement vehicle, but we certainly, with private aids to navigation, we routinely consult with those to assure that they properly mark a federal waterway.
Okay. And like to follow up with your folks. I know you've met with them. I know that my friend Senator John Cornyn, I believe, sent a letter, and Senator Cruz also. So I just want to follow up on that and see if we can find a way. And Mr. Chairman, we're going to try to look at possibly we'll talk to Chairman Carter about the same thing we did for CBP to look at giving you authority to allow a reimbursement. That's a call from Chairman Carter, and we'll definitely work with them.